Greetings, YouTube. LMS Tactical here. I'm going to talk about the murder of Mr. George Floyd in Minneapolis. I did post a video earlier, but it was pretty short, and I want to address a few things. And by now, I'm sure that countless officers, active duty officers, have made videos. I haven't seen them yet on YouTube. I've been busy today. But I saw on TikTok and such that I'm very happy to see that officers are speaking up. And what I want to do is, instead of rehashing some of the obvious stuff, I want to introduce some ideas and some thoughts that I've had throughout the day regarding the situation and where I think it might go and where I think it should go and why I think, and also explain to some non-law enforcement people why things are the way they are in some cases and why they appear to be things that they're probably not. And I'll do my best job of explaining it. I'm just ad-libbing it, so forgive me if I hem and haw around a little bit. Okay, well, let's just start, just in case you haven't seen the first video that I made, the last one before this. I am a retired Los Angeles police officer, and after that career, I did 12 years as a federal agent for an inspector general in Washington, D.C. So I've been in law enforcement my whole adult life. And I was in law enforcement in the old days, pre-Rodney King in like 1984 and through the 80s and 90s, and then that happened, and so police issues and brutality and the invention of the video camera. I was wearing a badge and got to see the effects of all of that. And there's been a lot of changes, and a lot of it's been good. Some of it's been bad. But one of the best things that ever happened was the cameras and the body cams. I personally wish we had those when I was a cop. And I'm trying to get this in a way that's palatable, because I do tend to drift around a little bit with my thoughts, because it's such an overwhelming subject. So first and foremost, in my opinion, and in most normal people's opinion, it was what we saw in the video was a cold-blooded murder. I mean, it just was a murder. And I made a video and sent it to my own friends and family. And the majority of my friends are either active duty cops, for the most part being retired law enforcement. And I made a statement, and I stand by it. And I said it's not going to change, because what my statement is pretty simple. It doesn't matter. There's nothing that can come out in evidence. Nothing. I don't care if and this is a hypothetical, I don't care if Mr. Floyd had just slaughtered 37 children and then the camera started and you got the alleged cop with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. It's still murder. See, the way it works is, first of all, you don't put your knee on somebody's neck. That's item one. Could it happen in a life and threatening situation? I guess if somebody just bit off my partner's nose and was eating his throat out, and that was the only way I could subdue him. There's always a possibility, but maybe for a second or two. But here's the caveat to that. Once the handcuffs are on a suspect, that's it. It's over. I've said in other videos, look, I'm old school police, and when things were, people weren't so hateful toward law enforcement, and they were more understanding, and it's a dirty fucking job, and as I've said so many times throughout my career, you look at an officer and you look at his belt. There's an interview with me on YouTube here, way back when the show Cops first came out. I was one of the first guys to be riding along with cops, and it's me being interviewed, me and the creator of the show Cops. And I said this back then, and I was a young guy, and I said, look, man, look at my belt. Everything on the belt, none of it's designed to make you feel better. It's all designed to hurt you or kill you. So police work, by its very nature, is not a pretty thing at its worst. And that's when somebody's not submitting to arrest. And that's why I've said, anybody with a brain, my mantra is always, the time to battle it out with the police is not at the scene of the arrest. People, and this, I'm not saying this about Mr. Floyd, I'm talking about generally, when people get hurt or killed, it all could have been avoided if they just submitted to the arrest. And if it's an unlawful arrest, you file a complaint with Internal Affairs, get a lawyer, take them to court. There's other recourse, but you don't battle it out with the police because you don't agree with them. That's just because the thing is it ends in bad news. Rarely are you going to win a battle with the police. Even if you killed the cop, eventually the SWAT team's going to come and get you. It's just not a winning proposition, and it's not the right thing to do. We have a civilized society. A civilized society has to have law enforcement, and that's all there is to it. If all the cops in the world disappeared today, By tomorrow, sunrise tomorrow, there'd be a lot of dead people, and it would be the weak people, the people that are a lot of times the loud talkers, but they couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper sack, and they need people because the strong will eat the weak in an ungoverned society. That's unfortunate. It's human nature. So let's just agree for the purposes of this video that we need cops. So let's look at some of the questions. Oh, what I was going to say is it doesn't matter what happened. Once those cuffs were on, Mr. Floyd should have been picked up and put in the police car. I've watched the video, as gut-wrenching as it is. I've seen a lot of shit in my life, up close and personal. Watching him beg for his life and, people standing right there that could have stopped him. The other cop, and the look on that cop's face and the hands in the pocket, man, I don't know what's going on there, man. I'm not a dumb guy. I can figure a lot of shit out, but I'm going to tell you something right now. I'll be 58 next month. I can't figure that out. I don't know what the fuck he was thinking. There's no way to justify it. It was a fucking murder. 9 minutes on a guy's neck. Like I said in the last video, I don't care, it was 9 seconds. But, wow. And I knew right before I saw any other video there was no altercation. I've been in countless altercations with guys, and I've had to slap the shit out of people. Numerous times. I fought a guy that took my gun away. I had to fight it back again, I've been injured. I've had 33 surgeries now, and most of those are injuries from the police department, from fighting guys and getting fucking, look, it's a dirty job. I was fucking stabbed when I was a brand new cop. I mean, but when you are done with an altercation, somebody that doesn't want to get arrested, and you have a righteous altercation, you look like it. I used to come home from work and my ex-wife would be like, oh my God, there's my $30 shirt, a lot of money in those days, ripped to shreds, my name tag missing, I'm all scratched up and bruised up. That's somebody that doesn't want to go to jail. This cop was sitting there with his uniform, it looked like he just got out of the cleaners. There wasn't a drop of sweat on him. There was no reason in the world, and I don't care, it doesn't matter what that guy did, Mr. Floyd, he should not have been killed, and it's fucking irritating. So I want to address some other issues that are coming up, because the bad thing about this, there's so many bad repercussions from this. Number one, as we saw in the California Highway Patrol out in Los Angeles, people smashing their windows out and shit. There's such a misunderstanding and such a unfair broad brush painting of law enforcement. You don't do it with anyone else, If you're at a restaurant and somebody spits in your food in the kitchen and it gets out on the news, the whole country doesn't attack all cooks in all restaurants saying that they're food spitter owners. But cops are from society. They're human beings. You get bad ones all the time, If you look at it from the standpoint of, the numbers, it's not really as bad as other metrics that you could look at in terms of societal metrics. The majority of cops are good people. But the thing is when you get a bad one, all of the other ones are held responsible for it. Every cop in America beat up Rodney King. Every cop in America killed this guy. Mr. Floyd, I'm sorry. Every cop in America is a racist. But you're not allowed to use that broad brush with anyone else. I often say when we talk about racism, you got to be smarter than the herd mentality. My great-grandmother was, and I've told this story many times, she was brutally raped in an old folks home when she was dying. She was in her 90s, and she was so ashamed she didn't even, she rode a horse to school. She wasn't going to report that, and it was by a big black guy, and I've never held any other black people responsible. I don't feel bad about black people because of that situation. That was one guy. That's who I fucking hate. Not his kids, not his grandkids, but for some reason, all cops are painted with the broad brush, and it seems to be okay with so many people, and I find that to be unfortunate. One of the repercussions of that, and I've been predicting this for many years, and go back and look at my videos on police subjects, is it's already happening. There's a lot of police officers that are very short in terms of number. They don't have their recruitment numbers anywhere close to where they should be. What happens when you turn up the heat against good cops is smart people, anybody with a brain, would never subject themselves to that. You don't get rich being a cop. People generally become cops because they want to be cops and they want to do good. And I know the assholes are out there going to say, oh, they just want power trips. They were bullied as kids. That's fun to say, but the reality is most people want to do something good and positive. You got a lot of ex-military and a lot of people that want to help society. That's why I became a cop. And we did a lot of good. We did help a lot of people, and most cops do. You know, there are countless black men being stalked by countless white cops as I make this video all over the country, and nobody's going to get hurt, nobody's going to get killed because people cooperate. Mistakes will be made, but cops are not out hunting people. I could pull up right now videos of white people that were killed under the color of authority too. It's not, you know, is there a racial thing? I don't know. I just can't believe it. I'm not stupid, and I've been around a lot of cops. I've never heard any cops talking about hating black people or wanting to go out and hunt them down. I mean, that's something I used to think happened in the fucking South, in the old South, in the old days, you know, the fucking 40s, 50s. I don't know. I'm telling you, it's not prevalent, or I would have seen it, because I keep an eye open for that shit. I mean, we treated pretty much assholes like assholes, and we were never once concerned with what color they were. That being said, I hate people get mad when I say that. That being said, it is a dumb statement. I apologize. That's just my brain trying to think of the next sentence. So what's going to end up happening, I'm afraid, and I've been preaching this forever, is that good people are just going to not want to go into law enforcement. Now, what happens then? Well, when you get smart people that say, hey, fuck this, I'm going to the fire department, or I'm just going to go into some other thing and make money, well, the police have to employ somebody, and standards will drop. They'll start to employ the people that apply. And I really fear that if you think you've got a bad police department now, wait until you get people where they got to make exceptions. You know, it already happened with the consent decrees and when they lowered the standards in LAPD. We got cops arrested for bank robbery, stealing dope out of the evidence room, selling it. That was all after the courts ordered that we had to lower our standards. And we all predicted it, and it all came true. There was scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal because you were hiring guys with arrest records and prior gang activity. And, you know, if you put a fucking badge on a criminal, you don't have a cop, you have a criminal wearing a badge. And that's what's going to happen. And if you think you hate the police now, you young people, wait until you're my age, you're going to be looking back going, man, I sure miss the days when there were real people out there that really wanted to wear the badge and weren't concerned about the money and wanted to go out and find bad people and get them off the streets. Society, I believe, hurts itself when it turns against its protectors. I really do. And remember, its protectors come from society, the very society you live in. So when you look at the cops and why they're so fucked up, you might want to look at yourself and go, well, what's going on here? Are we opening the door for people? Are we saying hello, good morning, excuse me, yes sir, no sir? No, we're not. We're taking everything out of society. God, we're taking anything that is considered, that used to be considered stable now is considered weird. And I digress. So that's one of the outcomes I'm afraid we're going to see. I wanted to address this too. This is a little bit more complicated for me to explain because I'm not an attorney. I'm just an old guy. And I think this is going to change because things do have to change and mature, and as technology improves, things change. One of the questions you get often when a cop gets arrested, and any attorneys on here that watch this, correct me, I'm sure I'll make a few mistakes, technical mistakes, but this is a very loose explanation of what's going on. And I'm talking about everything prior to Mr. Floyd's murder. And by the way, look I'm very comfortable calling it a murder, and this is a new thing. In the old days, I wouldn't have done that because, you know, we're all innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and I want to address that in a second. But let's just take everything before that. When a cop takes a life, and I don't mean murder somebody, I'm just saying, let's say you arrest a guy, you get in an altercation, and he dies. And that happens, that's common. It happened to me, and it's a fucking thing I've had to live with for a hell of a long time, and I could do a whole fucking segment on that. It's not taking somebody's life is, I hope you've never done it. I really do. But when that happens, here's generally what happens, and I'm speaking from LAPD, but this is with very little variation. This is what happens. So you go to make an arrest. The guy decides, fuck you. He starts fighting with you, tries to take your gun, whatever. In the fight, he hits his head, he dies. Immediately, what typically happens is you're taken off of the field and you're sent home. And then, so the citizens who hear it on the news, they're like, oh my God, he gets to go home with pay. That's bullshit. Well, there's a reasons, and I'm going to get to that. So he is home, and he's still getting paid. He's not acting as a law enforcement officer. And two things are happening. There's an internal investigation to determine whether or not this guy violated any policies. You know, should we fire him? Does he need retraining? Whatever. And then there's a criminal investigation, and this is the way it goes. And like I said, I've experienced it. So the people that investigate it are homicide detectives, and you know, I remember being a young guy and feeling like I was a criminal, you know, because my God, I'm one of the good guys, and they explain to you, hey. They come out, they look at all the evidence, they take my statement, they take the witnesses' statements, they talk to the coroner who did the autopsy, they talk to the medical people, they do a full investigation like any other murder, and then they stack it all up and they take it to the district attorney, and they say, hey man, is there anything we need to know? Should we file on this guy, or what do you think? And then the district attorney looks at it and says, okay, it looks like it's a murder, go out and arrest him. Cop gets arrested. Or, you know what? No, this is justifiable homicide. It looks like everything was legit. That's the way it's always been done. And of course, then you got civil shit that goes on. So it's, you know, it's not like the movies. These things go on for years and years, and they're very, very stressful. I'm burping here as I talk about it because it's bringing up bad memories. So the cops are sent home. And then when there's enough evidence, and the district attorney says, hey, I'm going to file charges, and they place the guy under arrest. Now, the reason they do that doesn't seem fair to civilians, because they're like, well, if that was me and I got in a fight or whatever, and I killed Mr. Floyd, I would be arrested right there on the scene. Well, police officers have there's reasons for different treatment from the police officers. You know, a cop wears a badge, and the badge represents the city or the state that he's sworn to protect, the oath of the United States, and the city has entrusted him to enforce these laws. And there is something in a legal jargon called a chilling effect, and if every time somebody died during an arrest, the cop was arrested and then went through trial, and then they found out that it was okay, and no cop would really get involved with anything because they'd be terrified that they'd be getting arrested. So you give the benefit of the doubt to law enforcement because they're in a position where they're constantly looking for criminals, they're tying up with criminals, and there's just a bigger chance that things are going to happen. And when you carry guns and badges and sticks and you're looking for people with guns and knives and criminals, there's a good chance people are going to die. And you don't want to arrest every cop every time somebody dies until you're relatively sure that there's been a crime committed. That's a real broad way of explaining the way that things have been up until now. And that's why it was always taboo for anybody to say if a cop was suspected of like what happened here. Normally cops wouldn't say, oh, he's guilty of murder, you know, he's just been arrested for charged with murder. I'm very comfortable saying this was a murder, and this is a real departure from my normal history, and that's because I watched a video today. Now remember, we didn't always have videos. And I'm looking at a video, and all I know is what I see on that video. And though videos don't always tell the whole story in other more complicated situations, in this situation, once I see a man handcuffed, begging for his life, saying, I can't breathe, and the crowd of people telling him, hey, the guy can't breathe, you're going to kill him, and then he dies, I don't fucking need to see anything else. I'm very comfortable saying the cop murdered him, and the assholes that stood there watching, the other officers, are just as responsible. I'm comfortable with that. And that makes me think that there needs to be some tweaking of the system. Now that we have the technology of cameras everywhere, body cameras, security cameras, maybe we need to take a different look, not we, but maybe the system needs to look at, maybe add an addendum or something in there that when something is clear cut, when there's crystal clear video proof or video evidence, let's say, that it's more than likely a crime was committed, then the officer needs to be murdered. Hang on, I'm not making a YouTube video. I'm sorry, it's my wife. I'll be right there, babe. So, what was I saying? I'm on the deck out here, and she probably wanted to come out and sit with me. Oh, cute. I love her. But, yeah, so I think that maybe this case might actually help change things so that there's not this weird message sent to the public who sees a guy blatantly kill a dude and then go home. I understand why people are upset, but I want people to understand that change takes time, and things are always being tweaked and changed as technology, and it takes a lot of bad things to happen before something good happens. And that brings me to the next thing. And this is not comfortable, and people are, the real cop haters and the non-thinkers and the very linear thinking people are just going to jump out at me and say, oh, you're defending them. I'm not defending anybody. I'm trying to explain to the non-law enforcement people why things are the way they are. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you that Not only do I think it should change and it will change, I've come up all day. I've been coming up with ways to make it change, and I'm sure other people smarter than me will figure it out. But it's real clear to me what needs to happen on this next subject, which is the cop that just stood there. And now we need to go back in history, and you don't have to like it. I'm just telling you that history changes. You know, we used to have slaves. We don't anymore. We used to ride horses. We don't anymore. History changes. Societies evolve. So, you know, holding somebody responsible today for shit that was common, 10 years ago, it's asinine. So, but things have to change. Now let's look at the cop that was standing there. And by the way, I know nothing about these guys. I don't know how much time the guys have on. My son called me and told me that the cop that killed Mr. Floyd has a long history of violence and blah blah blah. So he's been around for a while. I'm gonna guess he was the senior officer, meaning he had more time. The Asian officer looked kind of young to me. Didn't look too experienced. Now, and this is not excusing, I'm explaining. Law enforcement's gone through metamorphosis and growth and change like every other industry in America. Now, long before I was a cop, there's a movie for you millennials. You might want to look. I read the book, and there was a movie, and I think it was the guy that played Scarface, Al Pacino. There's a movie about a cop in New York. It's a true story called Serpico. If you don't know anything about it, Google it, look it up, check the movie out. It's Serpico. It's a true story. And this is the way police work was. Is my battery getting ready to die? Because I see something flashing here. Hang on. Okay, sorry about that. My other phone ran out of memory, so I stopped recording about 15 minutes ago. Let's see, what was I talking about? I hate this. I think I was talking about why the other officer stood there, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but here's the thing. Back in the old days, I think I was talking about the movie Serpico, and that was a movie that had to do with it was a true story about a cop in New York who was not corruptible, and he basically testified against the other cops. And so, they tried to kill him, and there was this code of silence amongst cops where you didn't burn another cop, and they wouldn't back him up. They were just terrible shit. It was a very true story, and that's how police work was in many cities back in the old days. And then when I got on in the 80s, it wasn't as bad as that, but the reality is it was still very. There were things that have gone away since I came on that are considered hazing in the new world today. And all of this ties in to the police mentality and why it's taken a while to get to where we need to be. And I think we're getting close if we just don't destroy ourselves in the process. But back in my day, when you were a probationer, you just got out of the academy, you couldn't grow a mustache, you couldn't wear short sleeve shirts, you couldn't wear boots. Those were all rites of passage that had to be earned, and they were traditions that went way back. And nowadays, the young millennials would look at that as hazing, and that would probably hurt somebody's feelings. But that's the way it was. When it came to a cop who felt comfortable telling an older cop or a senior officer that he was doing something wrong, it would be unusual because it would take a lot of guts to do it. It would go against the whole police thing that probably dated all the way back to who knows when, the 1800s. And it wasn't right, and it began to change. And there was a time when if you testified against another cop, you were considered like the scourge of society. I don't say this with any pride, but the reality is I was, unfortunately, I was there when a police officer did something that was wrong, and it was abusive. And I make I have no sorrow that I did what I did, but I brought it to the attention of the command staff. There was a huge investigation. There were a lot of division within the division I was in, so to speak. The people that were friends with that cop hated my guts and probably would have liked to see me dead. And the people that knew that I was a righteous cop stood by me, and it's a hell of a story. I mean, I had a lot of backup from my people because my people knew that I was not a fuck up, and I did things for the right reasons. And somebody got in some serious fucking trouble over that, and that was their responsibility. I don't regret it. My reason for telling you that is we might have progressed a lot, but when I looked at that other Asian cop that was standing there when Mr. Floyd was being murdered, My guess, and I don't know anything about the guy, my guess is he's a younger cop, and I just don't think he felt empowered to be able to just tackle that guy right off of Mr. Floyd, which is what should have happened. Uh, and what I think is going to happen, I pray this happens, I think that law enforcement in the entire country, when they're training and they talk about, what's the word I'm looking for? I lost my train of thought in this last 10 or 15 minutes. But when they're talking about ethics, they need to make not just a 6 or a couple hour class. They need to spend a couple days and have in their ethics training the absolute 100% mandate, not suggestion, but a mandate that whether it's your first 5 seconds on the job or your last day on the job, when you see injustice, when you see rights being violated, and when you see somebody getting hurt wrongfully, you see your partner or any other person, even if it's a chief of police doing something wrong, that you are not only responsible, but you are mandated to get involved and to put it to a stop. And if you don't, you're going to be held just as responsible. It's be like if I was a getaway driver for a bank robber and the guy went in there and killed a bunch of people, I'm responsible for murder. And that's what needs to happen. And the reason that should happen now is because unlike in my days, we have, they have body cameras now. There's things have changed. There's technology. It's not a questionable thing. If you were to tackle your partner and stop him, he couldn't make up a bullshit lie and say, hey man, this guy just fucking tackled me because he was trying to let the suspect go because he could have flipped the story around. But now we've got a lot of ways to prove that the officer did the right thing. And when we're talking about life and death, it doesn't matter. You stop a murder. You're there to protect and serve. And if you're a brand new cop or even a civilian, and somebody asked me today, well, what should we do as civilians if we see a cop killing somebody unlawfully? That is such a complicated question, because the right answer is you stop the murder. We all have an obligation to stop that. But I am not comfortable, and forgive me, I'm just not comfortable yet in my life to tell people that they ought to draw guns on armed cops. And morally, I know it's the right thing to do, but God, I just don't see that. I can see that coming out so terrible. The way I answered it is it's a personal judgment call. Just remember, you're gonna pull a gun, or you're gonna tackle a guy that's got a gun and is obviously killing somebody, so it's probably not stable. It's just, I don't know. That's such a complicated thing. I mean, obviously it'd be easy to sit here and just say, yeah, you should just draw down on the cop and say, fuck you, get your hands up, I'm placing you under citizen's arrest. I wouldn't recommend it, man. Would I do it? Yeah, because I know how to do that. I carry a gun. I'm familiar with it. I would be better at doing something like that than some guy that sells shoes for a living and has not been in a violent encounter. I would admire somebody that would do that to save lives, but I'm not going to endorse it, not at this point in my life, because I don't want somebody to get hurt or killed in addition to whatever it is you're trying to stop. So I know I'm hemming and hawing around that. That's a deep, deep subject. But so hopefully I've addressed a little bit of what you were thinking about. I want to end it with the rioting. I was in the 92 riots. I've been in some other riots at the Palladium and whatnot. Now in the 92 riots, the protests are understandable, but you've got protests and they typically devolve into a riot situation. And within those riots, you have sometimes just people lashing out against society, lashing out against the system, break a window, do this, whatever. But you also have a certain percentage of these crowds that are opportunists, and they're just criminals by nature. And you know what? They're not thinking about Mr. Floyd when they're running and they're grabbing a big screen TV or they're burning down the store. And here's a reality that I hope that people that live in that area or may be involved in this, if they're watching this, I hope that they understand this. When the riots ended, and it was a terrible thing, if you're too young to remember it, look it up on YouTube. They burned down the cities, and the majority of the damage in the cities that were destroyed, the businesses, were in minority neighborhoods, mostly Black and Hispanic. So when the dust settled and it was all done, guess what was left? The people that had a store down at the corner that they went to every day to get their milk for their kids or whatever, their beer, was gone. The drugstore was gone. The supermarket was burned to the ground. And what happened was they destroyed their own neighborhood And they didn't really make a statement. The statement they were trying to make got lost in the destruction of their own city. And let me tell you something, people were not in a big hurry, businesses, to reinvest in those areas and to rebuild in a place that's so volatile that whenever something goes wrong, they get burned down. A lot of those smaller mom and pop stores were gone permanently because those are people in the community that are barely making ends meet, and they're trying to bring you a service and trying to make a living while doing it. And when you destroy them, you hurt yourself. And the worst part of it is oftentimes the message that was the original message of the protest, which I endorse protesting 100%. First Amendment, I'm a constitutionalist. But the message gets lost in the wanton violence, and then that breeds more violence, and then cops get killed, and that had nothing to do with it, and then people that had nothing to do with the protest end up getting killed. It's just it's so counterproductive to any message. I'm all about protesting. I'm all about change. I'm all about fighting for change. If I had to sum up this video, I would say, don't destroy your own city. If you just don't do that. Don't paint all people of any race, religion, or color or profession with a broad brush. All cops, most cops, the vast majority of cops are not racist, and they're not bad people. They're great people willing to give their lives for people they don't know. I've worked with them. I was one. The people that I saved and the people that white cops in ethnic neighborhoods save day in and day out, they're not saving white people, they're saving ethnic people. My pink lips breathing life into somebody who's unconscious. If I'm in a black neighborhood, they're black people. You cannot assume. It's no different if you assume that all cops are racist and abusers and power hungry. That's no different than some racist assuming that all blacks are criminals or stupid. You can't just fight either one. Let's keep things. If police departments need to change their training and they need to be held accountable, then let's do it. And I'm with you, and I'll stand with you in those protests. But let's not hurt cops in Los Angeles for something that happened in Minneapolis. Let's not burn down stores. Let's not advocate the hurting of police officers. When you call 911 or your grandmother calls 911, or the old lady across the street calls 911, the Army's not coming to help them. It's going to be some cop who's coming to help. If the cop does something wrong, we have recourse. There's internal affairs. Look, President Trump has ordered a federal investigation. This is probably going to end up being a murder or a death under color of authority. There's always options, and they don't go fast. Because as much as people might want to go hang a cop or go burn his house down, remember, we have to make a decision. Are we a civilized society? And if we are, we got to do things the right way, and the right way is not the fast way. Okay, and the right way too. This is what happened in Los Angeles. If the juries, listen, many innocent people have gone. I'm so sorry. Well, innocent people have gone to jail, but many guilty people have walked free because a jury found them innocent. I believe O.J. Simpson. There's a picture of me with him there on the wall. I used to go to his house. I used to drink with him at his house. He was a nice guy, but he was a killer in my opinion, and he went free. For political and racial reasons. And we didn't burn down the city when that happened. If you demand that a jury give you the verdict you want, then you don't have a righteous justice system. So let's get these cops in jail. Hopefully this cop will be arrested sooner by the time I post this video. I can't imagine that not happening. He needs to be put in jail. For many reasons. And then let's let the system work. And if the laws aren't strong enough, then get the laws changed. But don't punish the cops who are enforcing the laws. That's my message. And God bless, anybody that is related to Mr. Floyd. I don't mean to be melodramatic. I'm not trying to force a tear here. I will tell you, and those that know me know this is true. I'm sick out of all the people who've been killed by the police or killed wrongfully, this one really hurts because watching it's gut-wrenching. And I'm very sorry that happened. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. Let's tackle them out.